Darwining is a trick-taking game for 2 to 6 players. You're trying to adapt/grow/populate in order to become the most dominant species. Dragon Dawn Productions provided this in exchange for an honest review. Place the food chain track in the middle. Players take a species board and player marker and gain population markers equal to the starting population on their board. Place player markers on the food chain track matching the numbers on the species boards. Shuffle the environment cards, then put out a number face up near the food chain track. 5 in the first era, 4 in the second, and 3 in the third. In the longer game, use 5, 5, 4, and 3 cards. Deal 10 trait cards to each player. The player lowest on the food chain track chooses who starts. Trait cards may contain up to 4 pieces of information. In the top left and top right are one of 3 suits and a value between 1 and 15. In the top center is the amount you can move up on the food chain track. On the right is the population increase, the left is an environment icon. The bottom shows the card's trait, plus the victory points earned for playing the card as a trait. Traits can provide additional food, allow species to avoid being eaten, continue to mutate, and other effects. Eras consist of a number of tricks led by the player who won the previous trick. In turn, players play 1 or more trait cards to beat the strongest combination of the trick or throw away a single card. The combinations are poker style, and there are reference cards to show strength from strongest to weakest. The trick taker chooses one of their played cards. A card can be placed at the top to move up the food chain the amount shown, jumping over occupied spots to a maximum of 20. A card placed to the right adds that number of population markers to their board. A card placed to the left helps your species adapt to a new environment. A card placed on one of the 5 trait slots provides that effect for the rest of the game, plus gain victory points in all but the bottom right space. The era ends when 1 or more players are out of cards. Players do not need to show how many cards they have during the round. The last trick is a bit different. The trick losers get to improve their species instead. Players may keep up to 2 unplayed cards for the following round. At the end of the era, players must pay 1 food per population marker. Players compare the era's environment cards to theirs. Matching starting environments provide the food shown. Matching additional environments provide 2 food each. In addition, you may eat species lower on the food chain for 2 food each. Gain a bite marker each time you're eaten. If your food was higher than your population, gain a population token. If you can't feed all of your population, you lose a population token. After all players have fed their populations, they lose another population if they have 2 or more bite markers. After the survival phase, shuffle the discard pile, set out the new environment cards, and deal trait cards to each player until they have 10. The game ends after 3 eras, 4 eras for the longer game. At the end of the last era, players gain victory points for their position on the food chain, their population and environments, and for their traits. Win tricks, improve your species, and eat enough to feed your population to be the most successful species. That's Darwining. Once you know what you're doing, 3 to 4 players can play Darwining in 35 minutes, including setup and takedown. The math and reading levels in this game are around grade 1 to 2. Print out extra references from the PDF rulebook found on the publisher's website, and most 7-year-olds could play if helped. Experienced 6-year-old gamers might also be fine, but they need to be strong readers. Up to 4 might be able to play on a large coffee table. Although you'll have some tokens and cards around your board, player areas in the food chain board aren't huge. In our 4th game of Darwining, Mom was way ahead of us on the food chain track. She was a dinosaur, and I was a beetle. Dad, a frog, kept battling me on the track. I spent a few trick wins in the 2nd round to push just out of his reach, but he wasn't too far behind. We were mighty and carnivorous. Mom's dino and Grandma Seal never stood a chance. There's very little downtime in Darwining. Being a card game, turns are lightning quick. Scoring can be mostly done simultaneously. This speeds things up. There's one other thing to help make the game quicker. Scan and print the trait pages. Trust me, it'll help. Until everyone knows what every trait does, the game is slower than it should be because you'll be like, Wait, what does this treat do again? The game is fairly quick and is small enough to fit into a backpack. It's not as easy to teach and learn as, say, Bugs on Rugs, but I taught Grandma and she did pretty well. For a light-ish game, there are many decisions and choices. I love multi-use cards and they work well here. I like that you can play different amounts of cards. The secret hands mean you don't know when rounds will end, so there's an additional bit of push your luck. Finally, the losers benefit rule in the final trick helps balance things, although clever players can always count cards. I also love variable powers, and the species do feel different. Low in the food chain? Well, you probably have high population to balance things out. Some species have more difficulty finding food than others, and so on. If you start below 5 on the food chain, you can move up quickly. If you start with low population, you can add those easily. The one thing that's tough is adapting to new environments. I don't know about you, but the Arctic never seems to come out for us. Sorry, seals. Thankfully, you can eat those lower and higher, depending on traits. Speaking of traits, it's common for everyone to go for the same ones. We don't see as much diversity as a game like Evolution. I know what they were going for, but I wonder if it would have been better to see the traits spread across different cards than always be on the same number. The 3-round game is too short, you barely get your engine going, and it's tougher for the species that start on the extremes, very low in the food chain, or with low population. It's better with 4 players than with 3. You have another predator/prey, and another person who may beat your hand. Being a card game, you're stuck with the luck of the draw. Someone could have a killer hand and win nearly every trick. I suggested we try a draft, which made things much better. The imperfect knowledge of what was out there added some strategy. Unfortunately, it slowed things down too much for my liking. This game needs to be as close to 30 minutes as possible because there just isn't enough to do to keep it interesting past that. The draft pushed things closer to 40. Maybe instead of drafting all 10, you draft 5 and are dealt 5. Darwinning isn't just another trick taker. It has hand and resource management, resource scarcity thanks to the way environment cards come out, and there's a race element. I recommend this to fans of card games who want a bit more to their games, and board game fans that enjoy a bit of strategy to go along with that high amount of luck. I think there's too much luck and not enough depth, but that's just me. Hopefully this video helps you decide if it's a good fit for your family/group.